Hey everybody, welcome back. So the latest episode of AI Unleashed, we are starting recording in 2026 and it's an exciting year for all of us. And today I am joined by somebody I've had quite a few conversations with and I've actually shared a stage with as well. And that is Sara Tindall from Jetronics. Welcome, Sara. Would you like to introduce yourself for everybody who's listening?
Yes, hello, I'm Sara. I have been working with Getronics now for nearly 3 years. I think I define myself as a third culture kid. So that means growing up in a culture that's different from your passport culture. And what I've loved about that whole experience, that kind of outsider perspective that's really helpful when you're working in L&D because it really makes you think about it's helpful for when you're trying to think through personas and perspectives. And also when you're having to navigate different cultures, the challenges that come with that makes you really empathetic when people are trying to face something new. AI is a massive, big deal. And so I feel that this particular aspect of where I've come from is quite helpful in thinking about how people are trying to navigate something that's a massive culture shift for all of us.
That's a very good point. I think everybody who's listening, reflect on, if we reflect on 2025 and 2026 and think about what's happening in the future as well as the turbulent years that we've had recently, the topic of DE and I has come up regularly, right? And
Hmm.
we're not going to go into that today, but it's always worth thinking about how you do get new information and where that comes from
Hmm.
and how many different perspectives you include in your gathering of the information that you need to gather when you're making decisions. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. So
Definitely.
on that topic, let's talk about 25 and 26. We've had a year. We spoke together a couple of times uh, over the last year. We've been on stage together. But how did the year go? We've had the AI revolution upon us for like 3 years now, maybe 4 years.
Hmm.
This is year 4. The last year, how did it go? What were you doing? Any realizations that you've had in the past, and then we'll move to the future.
Sure. I think the big moment for me was October when I like to say I had it. I don't want to diminish people who genuinely have panic attacks. I'm just going to say this is a use of hyperbole, but I had my AI panic attack in October for all of October. And I just want to share one of the most powerful sentences that you can ever say right now is, I don't know. And it's such a freeing and releasing thing to say. And I spent the whole of October going, I don't know, I don't know. I'd been sort of listening to people speaking with you, Ash, and other folks, and then just the enormity. I think it was really when the enormity of what agents could mean, like
Mm.
in all the most wonderful and beautiful and creative ways, as well as the huge risk potential it has for people's livelihoods, just kind of came in a massive crash. And so I rode that. I think it's very valid to kind of accept this and ride it while also having a clear plan of how to get out of it. And it was really helpful. I was at an event with Udemy and then someone articulated it beautifully. Um, their then head of marketing, Jennifer, who talked about we need a new OS for learning. And then suddenly that was kind of like the cognitive hook that I could suddenly pin all my cloud of thoughts. Suddenly I had something that it could coalesce around so I could actually understand what I needed to do for Getronics and all of our people. Kind of thinking about, okay, there's a new way in which we're accessing knowledge. There are ways that are people in my company that are already working differently using the agents that are available for them. And then back to this DEI thing, this equitable access to the future. How can I equip everyone in the business to have equitable access to the future? Because if you think about, the adoption curve and you've got, the early adopters all the way to the resistors, how can you help people make that journey in a way that frankly, is great for the business, but also protects them and their families too. That's in a nutshell what happened in my
Yeah.
October. Exciting times.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we did have this term "agents" thrust upon us
Mm.
in the middle of the year, or middle of the autumn or the fall, if you're watching this in the
Mm-hmm.
States. And it was a term. It was bandied around, and I think it's not only a technicality; it's also many companies were using the term "agents" or "agentic" without
Mm-hmm.
actually having agents or agentic capability, and that confused matters
Mm.
nearly every platform that's out there. You have Copilot and you can make little Copilots. You have Gemini and you can make little gems, and you have GPT and you can make little GPTs. And I think a lot of folks were just doing that and calling them agents, which is, it's a little bit incorrect. But we also have the whole spectrum of orchestration and workflows, which you may have AI capability in those, but that's the ability to call resources or to execute actions and tasks in third-party tools. So you have this kind of mix of things going on, and then people start talking about agents. And I think where we are at the moment, in just referencing the new OS for learning, I think the new OS for learning versus the new OS for corporate learning, I think are two very different things. And how people learn and how people access information and how people work back and forth with entities that are giving them information, whether that's people or digital or virtual agents, that is going to be different to how corporate departments for learning are structured and how they work and what kinds of things they need to do in an organization. And I think on both sides, there need to be some systemic changes in how we do business.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
that's
if
going
I
to
can
have
just jump in.
impacts on people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me just check if we're sort of thinking along similar tracks, or else we're going to end up talking across purposes. So what I'm seeing is people's expectations based on the new ways of accessing knowledge is going to have an impact on how learning departments provide relevant and meaningful opportunities. So that's one thing, which is sort of separate, versus your point to kind of from an organizational design kind of perspective. Is that second piece is what you're talking about? Have I understood you correctly?
Yeah, so I think that there are two very different things, and I think I'm positioning this currently. So if you're watching this and your curiosity is piqued, then go and look at some of the papers that I'm releasing. But we have AI software as a service, effectively, which gives us all these conversations around how do we train people, how do we think about AI literacy, how do we think about AI adoption. Because adoption is really people using the tech. And on that side of things, you do have IT teams are going to manage software as a service, learning departments are going to buy things and implement them. And those things are going to make information available to the workforce. On the agent side, agentic capability, agentic readiness is very different from AI and software as a service readiness. And on that side, you have effectively a synthetic workforce or a hybrid workforce. And that means that people need to be doing different things. People need to effectively be in the puppet master role, where you say, I'm a person, I'm a head of marketing, and I'm going to work with a bunch of agents that do media creation, media design, they write copy, they post it in social channels, they manage the platforms, they give me analytics, they help me with strategy, but I'm the puppet master and all of these things are working for me. That's got a very different headcount imperative, and it's also has a different imperative on how we think about the diffusion of innovation, because the diffusion of innovation is not the same thing as adoption. And IT teams tend to look at adoption as how many people have clicked on the thing that we've implemented.
Yes.
If you don't have people working, if you have agents working, then the number of people who are clicking on a thing is just completely irrelevant. So we have organizational redesign and a hybrid workflow and a workforce. And those things mean that the people that we have are going to access information, they're going to problem solve, they're going to do things in a very different way. And they're going to be that agile, doing things in the flow of work. And everything that we know about information delivery, information dissemination, pedagogic intent, all of those things to some degree are going to have to refactor or they're going to be irrelevant. So that's broadly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm glad you expanded on that, because I think if the one thing people take away from this podcast is what you just said, really sit with that, think about it, feel free to freak out about it, because that was my October kind of thing. And as you can see, I'm needing you, Ash, to articulate it still for me, because I'm still not there yet to be able to, when you know a thing, you're able to teach it, and I'm still not ready yet, which is great, which is why we hang out and I practice and refine and talk to other people and everything. But everything that Ash just said, it took me a few months for me to be able to, in this conversation, go like, oh yes, I know what you're talking about. So don't worry if you've heard this and you're like, what? I promise you it's hugely relevant. You will find it terrifying, and then you'll be like, wow, this is really cool. It's fun. Let's get through this kind of thing. So there's kind of like, I don't know, Sarah's patented 3-step phase of AI grief. I don't know. I'll have to figure it out, come up with a model, give it to Josh Burson.
Was it anger, bargaining, denial, something like that? The stages.
I'll adapt an AI one. The word, where freaking out happens regularly.
Yeah. I mean, that is a thing in workforces, right? Folks are, and this is where the fear and the mistrust and all of these things come, and this is why companies do change management. But even change management and skills, the way I think about it, are if you are refactoring your workforce, change management, upskilling, reskilling, all needs to be different. I know a lot of folks will say you need to do the change management bit or the reskilling bit first. And I don't think you can, because if you don't know
I
what your
don't
target
think you have
operating model
time.
is, yeah.
Yeah, you don't. You don't. Which is again where I'll say it's just be comfortable with saying I don't know.
Mm,
But also find
yeah.
smart people to think this through with. There are many in your company. There are people around in your sector. Have those conversations.
Yeah. So if we pivot a little bit and talk about, so that was 25, right? And the realizations, and we bled a little bit. We've moved into the 2026. There's a couple of different angles I want to talk about. So one is, what's 2026 potentially going to look like? And I don't mean, are we going to have robots in our kitchens or anything like that? But we all still interact with, work with, or work in organizations that have legacy structures, legacy systems, and they're trying to do things in an iterative or a transformative way. And that requires us to think in certain ways. In the industry of L&D, which is probably what we're talking about, we have systemic problems and we have systemic advantages. How can we shore up the weaknesses and capitalize on the strengths to do something meaningful during 26 with everything?
The only way that I'm going to be able to do it is with a really small pilot group and with a strong focus on how you're feeling about this. What are your concerns? What are your opportunities? And it'll be with people in the HR functions. They are quite aware of the consequences of what you articulated a couple minutes ago. And also, I don't know to what extent this pilot group are already comfortable with using AI or not at all. And so I'm just really curious to see both kind of like, I'm going to use the word emotional readiness as well as technical readiness, and see what we can do to kind of turn the dial. It's really going to be very experimental. I have no idea. I know the outcomes that I want, which I'm sorry they have to be because I haven't spoken to the folk yet. I can't really share yet, but I do want to co-create that. So for me, well, at least Q1 and Q2 with 2026 is a very personalized pilot to see if we can identify something that will grow. I've deliberately worked with HR because if this is something that we want to grow across the company, we can say, normally people equate HR with right sizing, which is the polite way of saying letting people go. If we can say, look, we have done this in HR, we have done this to ourselves, come work with us, let's work on this together. Another thing I anticipate is we've got some very, very clever technical people who you and Ash can kind of talk your language together quite happily for hours without me having to go, oh, can you rephrase that in noob, please? And so I think the challenge for them will be how can we work with you to bring the rest of us up to your vision and to your practices and things like that. So that's my working theory at the moment. Like I said, if you ever feel bad about yourself, come listen to me because I'm always happy to say this is what's working for me now. I'll probably have to adapt.
And there are two streams for what you just said, right? There's the human side, the emotional side, the how people are feeling, and are you going to bring them on a journey? And the other side is the technical side, the things that you're going to implement. Now, it may be that the things that you implement are going to affect the people whose feelings you're managing in a way that they're no longer part of your company. And I'm not saying you're doing that,
I'd like
but
to specify
hypothetically.
Exactly. And I think it'll be really interesting because how the sentence you just used, Ash, for people who are more on the people side of things, whose emotions you're managing, I think it's really important. Some folk can get a little bit too involved in that. Ultimately, the folk you're working with, they are responsible for how they feel, And so what you can do is create the space for them to kind of look at how they feel straight in the eye, but then they are responsible for taking professional decisions afterwards, which hopefully means that, if you like you say, there needs to be reskilling decisions made in the business, and therefore perfectly, great performers are just no longer, frankly, relevant for what the company needs. They nevertheless have the mindset, frankly, to succeed with another company. Just throwing that one in there.
Yeah. So on aggregate, if we move it away from your company and your specific situation for a second to avoid talking about anything that's tricky. If we move it into an organization, a hypothetical organization, or a societal
Yeah, so that was
level,
hypothetical just then. I want to say for
Yeah.
anyone from Dishonics watching this, purely hypothetical.
let's be explicit about that. This is all
Yeah, very
fantasy,
explicit.
right? We have the potential for a hybrid or a synthetic workforce that is made up of agents to be doing things that previously people did. And this is the message that we've known for 4 years. So this isn't new. We knew this was coming. And we've had conversations around this. And many of the conversations in 22 and 23 were, AI will never replace humans. It's there to augment what humans do. It's a tool for people to use. We are now in the reality that that's just untrue. And we have very sophisticated machines that can go off and do very sophisticated things that previously people did. That reality has an impact on how we manage change, how we think about skills, how we think about people and their role, their purpose in terms of employment. It has effects on society. From an organizational perspective, anybody who's going through this transformation, it may be that the people you're spending money on right now in terms of AI literacy programs and trying to upskill them and all of this stuff, it may be that they're just not part of your organization in the future. And that's a tricky thing for a lot of organizations to deal with, because you want to upskill, you want to think about top performers. You just said a top performer that, and I kind of disagree with this, a top performer whose role is no longer required.
You'd
They
keep them
might
in another
need to-
role, frankly, Ash.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they're truly a top performer, they'll be adaptable. They'll be
They can
hungry.
be
They'll be
adaptable.
ambitious. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So we have these layered effects. We have the individual level effect, we have the organizational level effect, and we have the societal effect. And all of these things are foreseeable to some degree. Now, the question on this is, with learning departments, we have two things to think about. One is the workforce and how we interact. The second is the department itself, the makeup of that department, what it does and what it should do, and what the skill set is in that department. And this is something I spoke about quite extensively last year, because everybody wanted to know, what skills do I need and what's the impact on my role? So let's just take the learning department, the hypothetical learning department, and let's try and scale this to the industry, whatever we're talking about. Agents are coming in, workflows are coming in. You can pretty much do everything that a learning department does in a box with some agents. That's my opinion. Whether you agree or not, tell me. But the impact of that kind of thinking on the industry, what do you think folks should be doing in the industry?
I think what would be, let's so that we can have a sane conversation. So because I have a tendency to get quite tangential, let's create the norm as, exactly. Let's have the norm as this will happen. It is possible for it to be like this. And we can see the weaknesses in that argument. We're not going to debate that right now. Let's imagine that is a thing, because I think that's a really useful mental exercise to just about how differently we need to think. To what extent, whether it's 100% or 70% of what you predict, Ash, doesn't matter. It's the mindset shift that I love about your position about that, because it really makes you think. And I'm still thinking through it, Ash, but the main thing I wonder is succession planning. Like, imagine I've done that. All right. It's just me and my agents, right? And I've got the puppet master. I'm the puppet master. And then I either retire or I win the Euro Millions and I go. How do how do you develop people to be ready to do that? That's just an interesting question. I don't know if this is something that we necessarily need to solve, but how, when you have the old kind of internship model or thinking about apprenticeships and things like that, I just wonder if this, that just in terms of workforce planning, is just blown out of the water. I don't know a route through it yet. And I wonder if we have to kind of experience it to know. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So there's a time element to succession planning and strategic workforce planning. So if me today, with my fully agentic business, mostly, if I need to think about succession planning, the way I would think about that is a human employee that has the puppet master role is going to have a natural life cycle of X years, whatever that is. We've seen how quickly the tech is moving. In a year's time, the chances are whatever this person's doing will need to be elevated, because the machine will be able to do that. And we get this kind of constant elevation of what human capabilities need to be to still be functional in a hybrid machine-human world. So I think succession planning is a tricky one, because I've been doing this full time, like all of my time.
We joked you didn't have a break over Christmas.
No, I know. Yeah, so I work 7 days a week and I work long hours because I love doing what I do. And what will be on January now. So I've been doing this full time for a year and 2 months ish. And before that, I was doing it part time for my business, and I was also working in a big company doing this as well. So, and I had this conversation couple of years ago with somebody that they were, when we had the generative AI revolution, the ChatGPT 3.5 model came out, and everybody was blown away by this. And this was the thing that we all talked about. And at that point, I had a bunch of people, I'm not going to say who they were or which company they worked for, whether I was working with them or for them or not. I'm not going to say any of that stuff. But some people had said, this AI thing is going to go away. I'm not going to bother with it. We don't need it. Me, I was
But the thing
fully
is,
the other
Ash,
way,
they were
right?
old enough to remember the internet and people saying the same stuff. Why would you make that same mistake again? That was the daft thing. When I heard all of this, I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, come on. Let me refer you back to the 90s.
Exactly.
But anyway,
Right.
sorry,
We
Ash.
have seen this stuff before. And
Yeah.
those folks, a year and a half later, they were then on the bandwagon saying, we need to do this. And my flippant response at the time, and now I thought it was flippant, and now I'm like, no, I was right. And, I'm usually right about these things, was if you've spent a year and a half ignoring this thing, or you've spent a year and a half full time working on this thing, learning everything that you know, and you might maybe have a background in data or coding or something, the difference is staggering. It's not just a year and a half of lost time. And now doing this stuff full time for a year and a couple of months, accelerated by agents and workflows and all the stuff that I've built, the gap is massive. And the reason I say that is that anybody who's in this space that we're talking about, where we have succession planning, and we have some agents, and we have some companies that are moving slowly, some companies that are moving quickly. Everybody's thinking about their skills. Everybody's thinking about how do I, move forward with this. The folks that are still in the space, if you're watching this, I'm looking at you, if you're watching this and you're still in the space of, I'm not naming the company deliberately, it's an example, but if you're still in the space of, I'm buying a license for Synthesia or Colossian, and I'm going to make a bunch of videos, I'm going to put that on my LMS, and that's what AI is. If you're still in that space, you are so far behind that you won't be able to catch up.
Although
and that's
I would like
there's
to,
such a massive gap.
Although I'll say this, like with vaccines, it's never too late. So if today that was you, tomorrow that cannot be you. And you can start, and then you can just begin the journey. Because I think one of the things that is overwhelming about AI is the amount of catch up you do need to do. However, I have observed the significant growth, even like October, it was when I realized how little I knew, and just what I've invested and just how different I am. There's still lots for me to catch up on, but the gains have been exponential. So I think you're right, Ash, to scare the heck out of people saying, I'm doing AI because I just got Synthesia. Okay, so be scared if that's you. However, it's not too late, and just start taking those first steps. And if you don't know where to begin, talk to Ash, talk to me. I'll be frank, if you're happy to be scared witless, definitely talk to Ash. I like to be scared witless, that's why I talk to Ash. But if you want to kind of go into the shallow end first, I'm happy to talk to you too. But eventually I will say, and now it's time to talk to Ash. So there you go.
So let's tease that out a little bit. So we have individual level and organizational level, and these are different things. Now, I get what you're saying, that, what's needed is, if you're in this space that I've just articulated, which I've said is archaic, and the things that you need to do are, of course, change mindset, realize that there's something you need to go and research it, because start playing with some of these tools, etc., etc. That itself takes some time. While you're doing that, the people who've been on this for a while are also doing all of that stuff, but they're doing it in a way that's accelerated. So that's an individual level, and you got to figure out for yourself how you catch up. But the reason I'm talking about that is that we started this with what do learning departments need to do for either refactoring within the department or making sure that the workforce has appropriate level of skill. So there's a mindset shift. If you're in an organization, individual we talked about, if you're in an organization, mindset shift in an organization doesn't happen quickly. And if you're in an organization where you've shown this shiny thing and everybody's been blown away by it, that for me is a huge indicator of there's structural stuff that needs to happen. When that structural stuff needs to happen, that is a transformation, and that's going to be painful because transformations are always painful. I mean, let's be clear about that. And that's where I think the gap is so huge that we will see companies that are just no longer competitive in the market.
Yeah. And I think, and something that is quite interesting about AI is it really does And I don't mean the tool, sorry, but I mean everything that's around it. Excuse me, everything that's around it. It does expose weakness. Yeah. So again, I think you have to be brave to look at your situation, your company situation, straight in the face, and kind of say, okay, guys, can we make the decision fast enough that we need to stay relevant and commercial?
Yeah. Let's talk about speed of decision making now, because you mentioned it.
Yes.
So
Crumbs.
yeah. So let's plug. I have AI readiness models for companies who are doing SaaS implementation of AI, and I have agentic readiness models for companies that are looking at that. Now,
Nice.
they are structured leadership, strategy, tech, data, governance, all of the things that you would expect in a framework or a model. But the reason I've got two models instead of one, I did think about updating, and I thought, as the more I got into it, I just thought it needs to be two, right? And the reason for that is speed of decision making. Speed of decision making at a leadership level, when humans are making decisions, needs to some degree, match the speed and capability of some digital entity that has resources that it can mobilize and actions that it can take within nanoseconds, within milliseconds, within minutes. You could have something that is catastrophic reputationally or financially if you don't have the right governance in place. And that makes it very different from managing IT assets.
Yes.
And therefore, that's why there needs to be two separate models. But decision making is also something that's very close to the heart of L&D folks, because soft skill programs tend to focus on things like that. How relevant do you think that kind of soft skill upskilling, critical thinking, judgment, problem solving, etc., all of that stuff, how relevant is that now when we've got machines that can basically do that stuff better than humans?
So I was at your session where you talked about that. And I think that I don't quite agree on that element. Soft skills, power skills, probably a better articulation of them, isn't it? So kind of agree and don't agree. I just need a minute to cogitate on that, Ash. And I'm probably going to say a sentence that you'd be like, I think what you mean is this. And I'll be like, that's what it is. I wonder if what I'm trying to say is consequences. So you've got these agents that can kind of deal with these power skills faster, and you have data that shows greater accuracy in all of these various levels. What was the one? Critical thinking. Yeah, that was a really powerful. I think you had evidence that how these different LLMs could handle critical thinking better than a human could, kind of thing. So I'm wondering, do we end up hoping for replicator technology so we can live in a post goods world like in Star Trek? So it's all going to be fine, or what is the differential that we do bring? And I really don't know. And so suddenly the thought that popped into my head was consequences of this information, and then making that judgment call, perhaps.
My question would be, can you codify it? And I don't mean writing code, but could you say
No.
consequences is a thing, and the thing that and therefore we need to define the thing. And I've done some risk management in my life, so I think the thing that we term consequences in enterprise terms is usually financial, operational, legal, reputational. And there'll be a risk matrix, one of these 4x4 things with some green and some red and some yellow in the middle. And risk managers will go, right, we're going to take actions to go from here to there. So to some degree, we can say there are things that are consequences that we know exist in categories. When they exist in categories, we can put some rule-based structures or guidelines around them. I think the moment we can do that stuff and we can think all of that through, we are at the start of something that can be a knowledge base, a database that can guide decisions and prompts, etc., that kind of terminology. And we start to get to the point where we can enable the machine, the reasoning capability of the machine, to do some of these things. And it requires us to think, I think, what you said, it requires us to think about what do we actually mean by some of these terms. And the reason I always go for these terms, because these are the trigger words, back to 2023 and all of the glorious thought leaders on LinkedIn, it's all saying this stuff. Humans are better at critical thinking, problem solving, judgment, and AI is there to support them, and it will never replace them. And I think, again, that's just not true. But anything that we can codify.
But then maybe it's kind of like it'll replace our current understanding, our current framework, our current models. So it's almost like thinking of ourselves in a future state that has different set of codes.
I mean, back to what you were saying earlier about succession planning and, how humans are going to evolve. Every time a machine can do something, it requires us to rethink about how we elevate our roles. And I think that's probably the conversation that nobody's having.
Yeah. But wasn't it interesting how you and I were completely kind of like high performers will adapt? And so, and again, there's some really great evidence-based information out there about what constitutes a high performer. So we can, that'll be another conversation, but go look that up kind of thing. So I suppose it's save yourself by by learning the attributes of a high performer, practicing them and becoming one, perhaps is when we're looking at a future that we can't imagine, maybe it's that.
Potentially. And for a lot of people, that's going to be scary because,
Yeah.
you got all of these tech leaders, Sam Altmans and Elon Musk's of the world, saying that they're waiting for a one-person unicorn, a billion-dollar valuation
Messiah.
of a
Isn't
company.
that
Yeah.
fascinating?
The chosen one, right?
Exactly.
But what they're getting towards is, I have a company with 2 people and everything else is done agentically. And by no means, just to be clear with everybody, by no means is this a billion-dollar company, but it's scalable. And that's the key thing. Scalable and configurable. Now, what these guys are getting at is a thing for me, which is about top performance. And when we have top performers, their performance itself is going to be agile. It's going to be ambitious. It's going to be driven. It's going to be in tune with the market. It's going to be in tune with the tech capabilities. Those
It's going to be
folks,
curious.
yeah, experimental, innovative, all of these things. Those types of people tend, not always, tend to be different people than the ones who go to a big company, do a 9 to 5 of bureaucracy and go home and switch off at the end of the day. So there's a different mentality and a different mindset. Now, I think a lot of the folks that are fearful of the future are the folks with that mindset that doesn't allow them to be a top performer. What do you think?
Yeah. So there's a difference between an effective performer, those people who do their jobs and are meeting their metrics right now and doing it fine, and there is dignity in work and they should be proud of what they're delivering right now. And also at the same time, I totally recognize why that is scary, because then how do I change? And then, the whole reason why we have the idea of a high performer is it suggests there are others who are not. And then that's a tricky thing, and then this is where kind of like it comes to, because how can we go back to the societal issue? If we be as frank as this, it's all well and good, the Sam Altmans and the Bezoses and everyone kind of pushing these technologies forward, but then people still need to be able to afford to order stuff off Amazon, so however, the technology is not going to take that into account. So I don't know the route forward in all of this, and it is complicated. But again, I cannot overstate enough, look it in the eye and try and figure something out with other people. Just don't ignore it. Don't say it's never going to happen. You have to have courage. That's another thing, be courageous. So yeah. And that's another thing. If we think about the concept of a high performer rather than on a scale, but if we think of this as a mindset, maybe, okay, you can have people with this mindset who are already at the leading edge of all this thought. And, a great example, Ash, is what you've achieved with your company. Okay. But if you decide today that I want to start with this mindset, be courageous, be curious, and then that has already started you on the journey that will, frankly, financially protect you and yours in the hope, But
Yeah,
it'll
I'm
be
firmly,
interesting.
I'm
Sorry, go for
firmly
it,
of
Ash.
this
Yeah.
opinion that
Yeah.
if you do great things, the rest of it will just fall into place. And that's regardless of whether you're working for yourself, you're working for a big company. If you're working for a big company, I have to put the caveat there that if you're working for a big company, it's not always about doing great things. Sometimes it's about corporate politics. Sometimes it's about
Yeah.
other things. But everyone's going to navigate this. And this is kind of why I said, and you put it so much more nicely than I did, but why I said folks who go to a 9 to 5 and do basically bureaucracy for a day, because big companies tend to have, and I haven't read this in a paper, there's no evidence around this that I've read, but it's just observation of mine that big companies tend to have a small window of productivity in a day. And the rest of the day is navigating the systems of a company that are usually in place for governance reasons, but ultimately the bigger the company, the more bureaucracy there is and the more time you have to spend navigating your way through all of that stuff so you can do the productive thing, which is a small part of your day. That's a very different situation to somebody who's a top performer without all of that stuff in place.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess that's another thing for someone watching this, of kind of like, am I good enough? Are your circumstances giving you the scope to perform as well as you can. So think about that as well as you think like, oh, my life sucks, I'm not achieving anything. Well, if you have the ability to do it, are you perhaps in circumstances that are holding you back? And I think achieving great things again looks different in different places. And I'm not talking about yogurt weaving, kumbaya kind of things. So like, you can achieve great things by, stroking a hedgehog. But no, you can achieve, you can change the lives of kind of 10 people. And that is a great thing. Whereas some might argue the way in which Elon Musk is attempting to change people's lives with Doge, for example, was perhaps not a great thing because of, that was not a political statement, that was an economic statement. So I guess I'm just kind of saying, know what your great thing is and try to find the environment to be able to do that, because then other opportunities do emerge. And that's another thing, depending on your time of life as you watch this, it will stun you guys to look at Ash and I, but we're actually Gen Xers. So we have seen this happen before. I know, oh my gosh, how can that be? And this is just much, much faster than anything we've seen before. But there is something about human resilience and adaptability that means that we will outlast the cockroaches. Sort of slightly sci-fi reference there, suggesting that cockroaches will outlast humanity, but I think we'll outlast the cockroaches.
Interesting. Cockroaches.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if I agree with that, but anyway, let's take that future look, and in the last few minutes together, let's wrap that up and let's just think about the future. Are we going to outlast the cockroach or not? But the future, the near-term future, so 2026, 2027, you got a lot of people who are going to be fighting for their corporate survival. You've got a lot of folks who are going to be transforming and refactoring their businesses. A lot of people who are going to be doing org redesign and thinking about hybrid workforces and what the architecture looks like. And there's going to be a lot of folks that are just doing the same thing over and over again, standing up in a classroom with a PowerPoint and delivering it in a potentially excellent way or potentially shoddy way, right? The usual stuff. So what do you think 26, 27 is going to bring? Is it going to bring, hope, joy, dreams coming true, or is it going to be dystopian and people are going to be the opposite of whatever I just said?
Well, it's that typical meme, isn't it, where the sad guy's looking at the cliff wall and the other on the train, and the other guy's looking out at the beautiful view of the train, And I think it's what you will make of it. I really do believe that. And I'm sorry, again, I feel like I've just made a Hallmark card out of it. But again, it's down to your courage and your curiosity that's really going to define what happens to you and your department and your company in these next, year to 18 months. And just be courageous and look at things for what they are. I think that's the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Obama said this at some point where he was like, whatever it is, just go and do something. If, there's a pothole in your road that needs fixing, just go and fix it, right? And we're kind of in the same situation. You can go find out whatever you need to find out. Just go and build something. Just go and try something. Just go and use something. Most of these things have trials. Most of them have like a month free or 2 weeks free or whatever it is, or have low cost licenses. Just go and make things. I think
and give it a shot. And that's the thing. The other thing that you can absolutely rely on is there are so many people who are not doing that. Okay. So it is worth you doing that.
Yeah.
Because you will be making a difference for yourself. So, so if you've taken the time to even listen to us for however long we've been banging on for, thank you. But also just do that one thing.
Absolutely. So, Sara, it's been amazing to have you for the last hour. Have you had this conversation with me? And we've touched on quite a few interesting things. Thank you.
It's been a blast, Ash. Thanks.
If you're watching this on Spotify, follow the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. You'll see reels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, maybe even on TikTok if I eventually get around to that. So thank you for watching. Not doing the Fortnite thing or whatever. But yeah, thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.